Hey, in this video, I'll be telling you about how much of a Goliath One Piece is as a series, from how it is by far the most sold manga series, how it has dominated the weekly Shonen Jump charts for decades in depth, and so much more. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. The first thing I'll talk about is just how dominating the manga has been in weekly Shonen Jump. Now, I'll put on screen every single One Piece's chapter rating since it started. As you can see, it's pretty much glued to first place. But, as I was looking through some random issues, that's what you call like a weekly Shonen Jump magazine chapter, I randomly noticed something off. One Piece wasn't in first place in the list. It means that a different series had better average ratings than One Piece between their last 8 chapters. Now, it wasn't weird for a single chapter to have a slightly better rating than a One Piece chapter, but a full 8 chapters on average? I've never seen that before. So, that's what actually gave me this entire video idea. I decided to look through every single issue One Piece has been in since it began, which means I looked through every single chapter's ratings and compare them to other series at the time. And honestly, I was surprised. Alright, I was going to say each one, but then I realized there were way more than I thought. So, I made this nice little chart to show you how many times One Piece has been overtaken as the #1 series on average in those years. And, as I'm sure you can see, the early 2000s were a pretty competitive time for One Piece. In fact, in the year 2005, it wasn't even rated the #1 series of that year, because of one series in particular that kept giving it trouble pretty much up until it ended. I'll give you a short moment to think about what it is. In short, it's Naruto. Sure, there were many times that series other than Naruto overtook One Piece, but most series that overtook it couldn't hold the #1 spot for more than 3 issues, with the exception of Naruto. For 2002, it actually wasn't Naruto that stirred up so much trouble. It was actually, for the most part, the Prince of Tennis. Yu-Gi-Oh! Also overtook it for like 6 issues, which, that with the Prince of Tennis, made One Piece fall to 3rd. And then right after, it was Yu-Gi-Oh! And Naruto that made it fall to 3rd again. But after 2002, it was like only Naruto that made it drop over and over. From the start of 2003 and pretty much until the end of 2005, it was all Naruto that caused those entire spikes. The reason I'm saying pretty much the end of 2005 instead of just the end is because Bleach actually also overtook it in a single issue. Naruto was still over One Piece at the time, so it was already 2nd, but Bleach caused it to drop to 3rd for a single issue. While I'm talking about 2005, I want to reaffirm just how dominative the big 3 were in Weekly Shonen Jump. None of the series were slacking in ratings. They were all just destroying the competition. However, there was one singular series that could keep up at the time in Weekly Shonen Jump. Sure, it never overtook the big 3 while they were in their primes, but it could still very well keep up. It was iShield 21. But apart from one time in 2006 and 2008 where Bleach overtook One Piece for a single issue, it was entirely Naruto that just kept giving it trouble at every turn. Until 2011, where Toriko decided to step up its game, and half of the overtakings that year were done by Toriko. The rest were done by Naruto. And this was about the point where Naruto stopped being as well rated as before and stopped giving One Piece trouble entirely. I also want to mention a big disappointment I had while checking. I really thought that Assassination Classroom would overtake One Piece a bunch, because I mean, look at these ratings. They're also almost glued to the first place. So I thought Assassination Classroom would overtake One Piece a lot, but it only overtook it for a total of 2 issues in 2013. My disappointment was immeasurable. Joking. It also tied One Piece's rating exactly once in 2013, but that doesn't count. Pretty much after Naruto started falling off, there was no series that could even hope to rival it. My Hero Academia overtook it for 1 issue in 2015 and 2016, but that's all for those years. But in 2019, One Piece began to experience a little competition with Demon Slayer, because Demon Slayer had its final arc's climax, and I heard it goes crazy, which reflected in the ratings because all the overtakings in 2019 and in 2020 were caused by Demon Slayer. But it didn't continue because, I mean, it ended. In 2021, 2 series overtook One Piece. The first was again My Hero Academia, but only for 2 issues, right after the year had started. But the other series was Jujutsu Kaisen, and it overtook 2 times more than My Hero Academia. It managed to beat One Piece for 4 issues. If I had to guess, it was because the first season of the anime had just ended, and everyone was like, yo, nah, this shit is fire. And after 3 years of One Piece just dominating, one series, literally this year, In fact, at the time of recording this video, last week. Now, this series was already popular before its anime came out late last year, and its anime just ended, and everyone is loving this series. It's Blue Box. It overtook One Piece for 3 issues, and as you can see, 2005 was its worst year, and its best years are literally all the years that it hadn't been overtaken in. Do you know just how many series have been able to say that they've been in first place, even if just for 1 issue, since One Piece started? Just 10. Alright, if you want to get very technical, 14. Let me explain. Sometimes, authors go on hiatuses for a very long time. Whether that's because of health, mental issues, burnout, or whatever else. They can take a very long break. So, when they come back, the last 8-issue chapter average isn't there. And so, if they return with a lead color, they instantly get first place. That happened 3 times since One Piece started. It happened with Rising Impact, Steel Baron, aka JoJo Part 7, Death Note, and Hikaru no Go. But the series that didn't get first place like that are Naruto, The Prince of Tennis, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Bleach, Toriko, Assassination Classroom, My Hero Academia, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Blue Box. Some longer than others, but the fact is, they've beaten One Piece for the first place before. Literally any other manga other than the ones that I just mentioned in Weekly Shonen Jump have never actually had first place. Alright, let's move on to the next segment, which is the sales. Now, this segment will be quite short because there's really not much more to say than that. Anyways, One Piece is by far the most sold manga. Second place, according to Wikipedia, is a tie between Doraemon and Go-Go 13 with 300 million sales each. But first place is One Piece with a whopping 516.6 million sales. You could almost take both second places, combine them, and One Piece won't be that far behind. I mean, it is a lot, but I figured that One Piece will easily have more than 600 million sales before its ending. And even though Naruto was its biggest competition for years, Naruto found itself at only 6th place in overall sales, behind also Detective Conan and Dragon Ball. Naruto has less than half of One Piece's sales, with just 250 million sales. I just realized how I said just 250 million sales, while 99.9% of series couldn't even dream of having that many sales. It's still a stupidly huge amount. Just compared to One Piece, it's a bit meager, I suppose. Alright, to the second last segment, I wanted to briefly talk about just how huge the anime of One Piece is. According to my anime list, it's the 17th most popular anime of all time, and pretty much the only anime left that is still weekly. A good amount of anime used to be weekly. For example, Naruto, Dragon Ball, Bleach, Gintama, Black Clover, and more. But now, it seems like they've all slowly but surely either switched to a seasonal schedule, finished the story, or gone on an indefinite hiatus. The anime of One Piece is so fucking big that there are literally tens of movies, summaries, and other additions. Oh yeah, One Piece is, I think, the first anime I've seen that went back and actually reanimated an entire arc with new animation just because it was widely considered that that arc, the Fisherman arc, had dogshit pacing. Also, it's probably the first anime that is actually getting a complete new reanimation. Like, there's always been support for a complete Tokyo Ghoul reanimation, but One Piece is actually getting one, as One Piece is still ongoing with the original anime. That's how huge the One Piece IP is. Alright, honestly, I'm not sure what else to say about this. So, I'll just move on to the last segment. I want to talk about international opinions about One Piece. While I already talked about Japanese ratings for most of this video, I also think this is really interesting. I mean, among all manga, according to my anime list, One Piece is ranked the 4th best. Holy shit! I knew everyone loved it a lot, but 4th overall? That's actually insane. Its average score is 9.22 out of 10. I mean, the only mangas that are above One Piece are also highly rated series. Those being Berserk, JoJo's Part 7, and Vagabond. Behind One Piece is Monster, Slam Dunk, Vinland Saga, Fullmetal Alchemist, and so on. And not going to lie, all this One Piece hype has got me hyped up to actually read it. I previously, years ago, started watching the One Piece anime, but stopped after episode 27 for no real reason. But I've really been meaning to read the manga for a while, but I always hesitated because I also wanted to get the box sets and read it physically, but couldn't decide, and yada yada yada, whatever, I know. Getting back on track, the anime is extremely highly rated for an anime. Its average score is an 8.73 out of 10, and you have to take into consideration the Naruto and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood fanboys making spam accounts and putting One Piece as a 1 out of 10, so it doesn't overtake their favorite series. Yes, this is a real thing that the Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood really used to do, but they finally failed failed at doing it to free rent, and they eventually gave up. And is ranked the 51st best anime of all time despite that. And remember that this isn't relevant to the manga. The anime has like 1,125 episodes right now, and is a weekly anime, while the rest of the top anime are both finished series and seasonal, so they both already have a full and completed story with better animation. One Piece has amazing animation right now, but think about like the first half. Let me explain this a little bit more so I don't get hate comments, please. One Piece simply has the best animation right now. Period. Maybe the only competition right now that I can think of right off the bat is Bleach, 1000 Year Blood War, and Free Run to a lesser extent. They're both seasonal anime, and One Piece is doing all this weekly. It's extremely impressive what they can do in such a tight and unending deadline. But when you think back, One Piece didn't have, let's say, amazing animation before Water 7. Apparently, right? But for seasonal anime, because they can almost spend as much time as they want for an episode. That's a bit of an over-exaggeration. So obviously the animation is going to be better on average when you also consider the downsides for One Piece. Alright, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please be sure to like and subscribe, and if you've watched this far, then I'm sure you'll love One Piece. So here's a video where I talked about each of the big three individually, and little spoiler, I had a friend come and help me with specifically the One Piece segment. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. See ya!